Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good wherever you are, and welcome to this SNIA CSI Cloud Storage Initiative presentation on Cloud Object Storage and the use of gateways. So, before we go any further, I'd just like to point out that on the screen that you've got in front of you, there are a couple of things you can do. First of all, you can make this screen as large as your physical laptop screen or desktop screen. So if there's some detail you want to see in the slides, you can always expand it outwards. And secondly, you have the ability to do two things. One, ask questions. So feel free to ask questions as we go through this session today. And secondly, on your way out, I'd like you to rate this presentation on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is, goodness, I wish I'd stayed on the golf course, if you've got that kind of hobby in mind, or 2 or 5, which is more. We really like this. I'd like to see more of it. So remember to rate us on the way out. I do beg your pardon. So, without further ado, just a few technical things. One, here you'll find a SNIA legal notice. Basically, this says that SNIA own the copyright to this presentation. And the presentation will be available afterwards on our website. On the last slide in this presentation, I will point out where you'll be able to get a copy of it. And secondly, if you do use parts of this presentation, it'd be really nice if you use the entire slide and note the fact that SNIA have the copyright, just to make sure that we're all legal and watertight. And that'd be very helpful of you. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter today. In fact, Dan Albright of IBM is going to be doing the bulk of the work. Good. Where is it? Where you are, Dan? Is it morning, afternoon, or evening?
It's morning, late morning.
Late morning. Morning, Dan. Dan will be doing the bulk of the presentation. Dan's from the Cloud Storage Division of IBM. And I'm Alex McDonald from NetApp. You've probably heard me before on these SNIA CSI presentations. So, a little about SNIA. What is SNIA? If I can get the slide to move forward. That'd be helpful if it would. It's obviously not going to do that. Try once more. No, I seem to have a slot. Oh, here we go. It's moved at last. Oh, goodness, it's moved far too fast. I beg your pardon. I seem to be having some update problems. So while I'm trying to get back to the original slide, what I wanted to talk about today was SNIA at a glance. We've got 160 unique member companies and over 2,500 contributing members. The Storage Networking Industry Association helps over 50,000 IT end users and storage pros worldwide. And these educational WebExes that we do are part of our extended outreach program to a wider IT community. So without further ado, today's topics, I'm going to invite Dan to talk about market trends, the hybrid cloud strategy that Dan wants to talk about, some object storage bases, and then talk about gateway uses for the cloud, and then a summary. And remember, while we're going through this presentation, you can ask questions of myself or Dan, and we'll stop at appropriate points and answer as many as we can. So without further ado, over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, everyone, for joining this webcast. Again, my name is Dan Albright, Global Alliances Manager for IBM Cloud. So let's kick it off with some market trends. I think this is something that all of us have certainly witnessed in the past several years, and it is the data explosion, right? I find there are some very amazing stats that I think are clearly eye-openers. The first one is that of, you know, we used to talk in terms of megabytes and gigabytes a long time ago. It's certainly gone to terabytes and now petabytes, but exabytes are in conversation now. There's many organizations that have exabyte level requirements when it comes to storage. Zettabytes are very close horizon, 44 zettabytes that will be in the world digitally stored in 2020. There's another stat there on the far right that 80% of the stored data is unstructured. And that's the real explosion, the unstructured data. You think about where that data is created. It's created on endpoints, it's created within the enterprise, it's created through public cloud, and it is stored, and most of it is unstructured. Certainly the rise of the use of images and video is a huge contributor to that. And of that, 90% of all data is created in the last 2 years. So what this creates is a huge challenge for every enterprise. How do I cost effectively store and manage this content? Because it does have value. The file sizes are growing as well, which further exacerbates the situation, right? We used to deal in very small files a long time ago, but you look at the different types of files and the size of each file, and then the use of these files in everyday life of the enterprise, you can see why data content is exploding to astronomical levels. So what's important, well, how do I use this content? How do I make value of it? And one thing, certainly from a cognitive standpoint, artificial intelligence is upon us. And by 2018, 50% of developer teams will embed cognitive capabilities within their apps in order to better use more effectively and really extract value out of this content. User interface is important as well. I mean, just think from a pure retail standpoint. How long will you wait in order to order something? How easy is it to access that image or that video or whatever you're looking for? So the user experience is key to success for internet enterprise and provide that front door to support their customers and their clientele. But the other dynamic that certainly is in play is do-it-yourself won't work. Most organizations will try to do it yourself. They think that's a way to control or better manage the given platform frameworks that are out there. But quite frankly, they will try and many will fail. So it's really one of recognizing what you're trying to accomplish and what's the best opportunity for you to build a platform as service and have a very enterprise level cloud platform that you deploy in your business.
So Dan, just a quick question from me actually, because you and I discussed this when you were putting this presentation together, and it was orders of magnitude. We were talking about terabytes followed by petabytes followed by exabytes followed by zettabytes, and they're all powers of 10 to the power 3. So they're all 1,000 times larger than the other. It's a huge amount of data we're looking at.
Yeah, it's just an incredible explosion. And the thing is, many enterprises really don't know how to manage it. I mean, you think about what enterprises do and what they should be doing. They work around SLAs. They have expectations of accessibility, availability, certainly security of their data. And with the explosion of the content into that petabyte and exabyte range today, most enterprises are not well armed in order to manage it effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Alex.
I'm sorry, Dan. It's time lag between you and me. I know we're a continent apart. A lot of that data as well was being generated outside of traditional spheres as well, isn't it? And things like Internet of Things is generating a lot of this data, monitoring, measuring, CCTV, stuff that's really outside the traditional data center.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where this hybrid cloud strategy really comes into play. It's being able to not only extract value out of your own data, but it's to extract value and utilize the data that's publicly available. So, what are enterprises really trying to do in this regard, right? Well, they're trying to create cloud-native apps, in order to utilize the cloud. And what this does, it helps them to, release faster the capabilities within their own enterprise, either deployments for projects. It could be bringing on board new applications or content, those kinds of things. And then also what's important is understanding, what kind of user feedback are they getting in order to improve that app and those processes. But at the same time, they have legacy apps that they want to apply to cloud services. And these are apps that they have built processes for, around that are mission critical or business necessary. And yet they don't want to go of them. They want to make sure they're secure and they are accessible. So there's a delicate balancing act that's going on here. And they want to be able to maintain that governance and have control of that type of content, but also bring in the new content and latest tools that are available with that. At the end of the day, they're trying to build these new business models on the fly across all their ecosystems. Many times it sort of constitutes, and it's a probably overused term, of flying the plane while you're trying to build it. Another one is, and the other thing is optimizing all this. And there are some workloads that really work well in the public cloud. Others belong in a private cloud or on-prem. And determining from a business standpoint what is best for your specific business is the key to success. We're seeing a lot of opportunities to lift and shift selected apps to the cloud in order to gain better economics and agility overall when it comes to leveraging those applications. So the real key to success, again, is to place the right data in the right spot and utilize the analytics based on that placement and accessibility in order to reduce costs, mitigate risk, and optimize performance overall. And this is, Alex, this is really what you kind of brought up at the turn of the section here. You know, enterprise is turning to a multi-cloud strategy. Private cloud is great. It gives them the opportunity to reuse existing investments in terms of applications, technology, hardware, software, etc., and gives them a great deal of control. And what they're trying to do in private cloud obviously is extract more value out of their data and content throughout the entire business. However, the addition of public cloud brings in those new data sources. It really provides that exponential expanse of content and data available to the enterprise. With that comes new apps and services, as well as innovation opportunities that their developers can build those apps and then bring the two together essentially in order to have a optimal ecosystem when it comes to content and data for their business and for their clients. So from a hybrid cloud standpoint, it's all about cost effectiveness, but also be very competitive in the marketplace, because if you're not doing it, you know that your competitor is. So it's one of execution speed. You want to be able to change only what you need to change, because if you try to boil the whole ocean, you most likely will fail. So knowing what you want to change and how to change it is going to really provide a lot more value in a faster way. Flexibility is key. You know, things are not static. Workloads will change from period to period, and new workloads will become available as well. And you're trying to achieve overall business objectives through this huge change within your enterprise. Innovations needed in order to leverage what cloud services are available, as well as new ones being developed. New technologies are always out there in order to maximize that opportunity. And finally, it's the ability to really combine the data with new sources of data, hence the public and private collapse and I'll call melding of data, really to improve your business and your competitive nature of your business. So in that, the hybrid cloud is really, you know, you look at it in really three different main cloud categories. You have private, which is typically on-prem. You have dedicated, which is essentially a single tenant where you, through maybe a service provider or whatever, have a dedicated cloud that is being hosted for you, and you're using the services specifically only to your enterprise. And then there's public cloud. So through that, the strategy really is, how do I deploy all three to come out with the most effective use of this of the cloud for my business? And you know, you look at this little stat here about CIOs reported 60% of their workloads run in the public cloud, and that's going to grow to 41% 5 years. I mean, that's essentially a 3x increase in a very short period of time.
So Dan, we've actually got a question. I'm not actually sure whether this is a question or an observation, but it's certainly a talking point. Let me read it to you. It'd be most helpful to evaluate metrics confirming the failure of PaaS, that's Platform as a Service, along with the reasoning. More than 2 years, it doesn't say who has, but it says having successfully attempted to sell hybrid cloud platform as best practice. So I don't know whether this is a salesman who's attempting to sell hybrid cloud platform as best practice, or somebody who's actually been trying to consume it or deliver it. But it's an interesting observation. Why has platform as a service failed, do you think?
I think it's just one of infancy, right? With the explosion of data and the adoption of cloud, you sort of go into it as an enterprise. You don't know what you don't know. So there's going to be attempts. There's going to be failures to that. What is undisputable is that the trend is certainly to a hybrid cloud scenario. And in that hybrid cloud scenario also, many customers have a dual, like they have with hardware in the past, let's say, or software. They go a dual vendor type of strategy. We're seeing that many enterprises are going with dual or multi-cloud providers as part of this overall hybrid cloud strategy. That way they can sort of cherry pick the strength of each one of those providers and deploy it within their organization as a business process.
Yeah, that certainly matches what I'm seeing as well. Thank you, Dan. So, cloud object storage basics. Let's move on.
Okay. So, traditional solutions fails today's needs. Again, it goes to the exponential growth that we're seeing in content and data. The key to success when it comes to the storage architecture is being able to manage a hyper growth and the workloads associated with it to unlock data value. However, you look at a lot of the on-prem implementations, it just does not scale, right? And because it doesn't scale, it becomes inflexible, and it creates problems, management problems for the enterprise. So the key to success is trying to find a new platform in order to manage the explosive growth and enable innovation, discovery, and new experiences that benefit the enterprise. So that demand for new storage architecture comes again in the form of the hybrid cloud strategy. On-premise, why is there still on-premise needs? We've seen many, and this sort of goes back to the other question, is the failure as platform as service. I believe that there's been a number of enterprises that have actually over-rotated to move content to cloud, not realizing that it was maybe not a good match for some of the workloads and accessibility and availability, as well as some of the hidden costs that can be out there when it comes to, relying on the cloud on the public level. So on-premise, this certainly has its benefits. It's one of quick access, quick change for the most part, compliance and control. Having that control is important, especially, with mission critical and business necessary data. But the flexibility is key as well. So being able to yet have that on-premise control, but also utilize the economies that you can gain through a public or hybrid cloud scenario. So again, it's a learning curve for most enterprises on finding that delicate balance and make sure there's flexibility because things do change in the makeup of the content that they need for that period of time. So again, flexibility is key, consistency is change, and so the architecture has to be as scalable, has to be as flexible in order to enable the enterprise to make changes as they go forward. So this is where cloud object storage comes into play. It holds data where it's most available and most useful, and really provides the ability to have that flexibility. It's because of the type of the format and the scale that most object storage offerings can offer. Some are better than others, certainly, and that's where a selection of vendor selection process is important when it comes to choosing on-prem as well as cloud object storage options. First of all, flexibility, and we talked about this earlier, was, for on-premises, flexibility is key, control is key. But then when you start moving to the cloud, you've got to make sure that your SLAs are still being serviced from an availability standpoint. And then security has always been a concern when it comes to moving to the cloud. So you have to believe that object storage is part of that formula when it comes to security. And at the end of the day, make sure the economics are there, because there's a lot of hidden costs out there that you need to be wary of. It is one of deploying across the spectrum of on-premise to public cloud, where you can find that balance and achieve all these key attributes from flexibility to economics, and have a very effective ecosystem when it comes to your content and data. As far as use cases, it's very horizontal in nature. Certainly you can drive down to specific industries on specific use cases like media and entertainment. It could be healthcare, science, government, financial services. Some use cases are very unique, but the application of object storage across all industries is very real and very plausible. What we're seeing today is, again, the majority of the use when it comes to object storage, be it on-prem or in the cloud, it is for backup, it is for active archive, but we're also seeing great opportunities when it comes to using it as a content repository to be used as storage as a service, both, I'll say, at a development level, but also at an enterprise level. And then taking it to the next step, that of content collaboration and repurposing data that might have been archived, let's say, or maybe made consistent between on-prem to the cloud. That is where you really extract huge value when it comes to the use of object storage as the repository to use these types of use cases across the board.
So the questioner, by the way, on the previous question said he was trying to sell in as promote within his own enterprise hybrid cloud as best practice. He's obviously meeting some resistance there. It'd be interesting to. I've got an answer for that one actually. If you're having problems selling the idea of hybrid cloud, which I reckon to be a strong solution over and above, as we've talked already about a platform as a service and doing it yourself, I would suggest trying to get a vendor. I know that sounds a bit like trying to sell you something, but trying to get a vendor involved to bring use cases. I think the idea of having a use case behind this is always a powerful thing, and that's the best approach. If you're attempting to do that selling job internally, find other organizations in your space that are doing similar things and see if you can find use cases where they've used, for instance, hybrid cloud. And vendors can help there, so don't be afraid of contacting vendors. Anyway, gateways. Let's talk a little about gateways and the importance of a gateway.
Yeah, and to that last point, it's really important because it's one of trends. Understanding what your competition is doing as well as what you are promoting or trying to do within your own organization. On that particular point, over 50% of the enterprises today have a hybrid cloud strategy and are implementing it. So it's one of keeping up with your competition in order to maintain your competitive nature within your marketplace. As far as gateways go, we just talked about object storage, and object storage in itself is not a solution. It is a product, right? And it requires other technologies in order to provide, to have applications provide access to object storage. This is where the gateway really comes into play. Now, a number of applications out there, especially some of the backup applications, have developed S3 interfaces, but they're not quite optimized for object storage where these gateways are. And so, first of all, let's talk about what is a cloud storage gateway. It is essentially a translator, let's call it that. It is ways and means to provide a transparent communication by translating, let's say, an NFS or a CIFS protocol into S3 and enable connectivity to object storage for those applications that may not have S3 or ready for S3, actually optimize S3. So it's a huge solution in order to bring that on-premise capability, applications, connectivity, and processes to the cloud. They can make that cloud object storage, and they do make the object storage because it's really a proxy to look like an NAS filer, because that's what a gateway really is. Every gateway basically has its own file system. It could be global or otherwise, and really, looks like an NAS filer, maybe a block storage array, depending on the gateway, to provide that proxy to object storage. And the other huge benefit that many gateways have is the way to optimize that data, either through compression or data deduplication. They also many of them have the ability to provide a level of security to encrypt. And others have quality service for over the WAN. So gateways provide a huge value, and it's a great and very quick way in order to really start utilizing and executing to a hybrid cloud strategy. Well, and gateways can be deployed in many different ways, right? They can be a physical appliance that's deployed on-prem to do that translation. You can actually either on-prem or within a cloud VM service be deployed as a VM, or within the cloud. Many different cloud providers actually have gateways essentially as a tile in the marketplace within the cloud in order to provide this type of translation and proxy. So, all these, they're not mutually exclusive. They can be deployed depending on what your specific needs are as an enterprise when it comes to utilizing a cloud object storage, let's say, in the cloud, and what it means to your overall business process. So, from an enterprise business challenge, how can all this be deployed? The lift and shift of applications to storage without disruption. Obviously, anything you can do to avoid disruption is key, and gateways certainly can provide that capability. Looking at it from a deploying object first or cloud first roadmap, as we stated earlier, there's some enterprises that are looking at and haven't quite implemented hybrid cloud and are looking for those metrics or ways in order to deploy against that type of strategy. Again, gateways are a great first step. Accessibility is key, across multiple devices. Gateways don't have to just be used for cloud. It could be for on-prem, it could be, for object storage, it could be other types of device types. But it also is a consolidation point for endpoint devices, let's say, and therefore bringing in content and use it for data protection or archive or collaboration across, multiple geographic regions as well as organizations. Other challenges that have been addressed by gateways with object storage, reducing the cost of data storage management for file services, that unstructured data, once again, being able to optimize that and send it to a target of object storage within the cloud. The other is that of, archiving the data. It is a big misconception and always has been in my career. It seems like many times enterprise confuse, let's say, long-term retention of backup content compared to archive. Those are two separate use cases and can be managed differently through a gateway implementation. And finally, that of, synchronizing data across, the endpoint devices. It could be remote office, many times called robo, or bring your own device. These are areas where data protection is somewhat questionable to be adequate to the SLAs that are goals established by your data protection admin teams across the organization. Again, gateways are a great way in order to consolidate that and really provide and bring into your policy and practices data protection from remote areas and your mobile devices. And then finally, security. There's ways and means to provide security, and everyone knows that you're supposed to have multiple levels of security across the board. When it comes to, transfer of data, encryption is key, the ability to encrypt data, and depending on the object storage, some object storage can handle encryption a lot better than others and provide even deeper levels of security as a result. So the use cases that we typically see and what we experience certainly when it comes to the use of gateways with object storage. The first one that is commonly used, and that is what I call information lifecycle management in the cloud. It's a lot of times called drain to NAS. We all know that NAS, it's been a very valuable technology throughout the decade, and it's one that has sort of hit a threshold as far as its scalability. And, a commonly quoted statistic is that 80% of the content or data that sits on NAS is essentially unused. So is that the best use of money when it comes to, do I expand? Do I continue to sprawl NAS with that factor? This poses a great opportunity to move data off NAS into the cloud for a more cost-effective means. And that's where it comes into cloud object storage. It could be used as a tier 2 or tier 3 storage resource in order to change that economics to a better cost factor. You think about it just from an on-prem to cloud, one of the huge benefits of the cloud, and it's true when it comes to object storage, is the budget. There's a capital expenditure budget and there's operational expenditure budget. That shift to the cloud clearly enables alleviation and pressure on the capital expenditure, where you're essentially taking that capital asset, depreciating over 3 to 5 years, and having an upfront cost. Where cloud object storage in the cloud is essentially sold and purchased on as-needed basis. You can sign up to month to month, or you can either commit to a subscription for a 12, 24, or 36 months, whatever makes most sense to your business. So it's very flexible, and it's all taken out of your operational expenditure, which is a lot easier on the budget overall. The other thing is, again, mitigation of that NAS sprawl. So there's a balance. There is a place for NAS on-prem. It's very valuable, but use it for your most active data. When your data access pattern changes drastically, now it's time to move to the cloud. That being said, we also know that access patterns change. And so what was not used for a long period of time sent to the cloud may be used again for the business and brought back on-prem. Again, this is where the hidden costs when it comes to cloud providers exist. Some have those hidden costs, others do not. So when it comes to selection of a cloud provider and object storage, really understand the details. And if you don't know what your access patterns are going to be in the future, like most enterprises, make the wise choice where you don't have those hidden costs. Enterprise sync and share. This is a huge enterprise use case when it comes to use of gateways. It's the ability to take content from data endpoints, being able to protect the data that isn't normally protected well. It's for content distribution across dispersed locations and centralize all data into one location or into one centralized process and increase your ability to manage that effectively. Gateways have that ability, either through their global file systems or robo implementations, to provide an enterprise sync and share, supporting enterprise sync and share use case. And then finally, there's the application lift and shift. This is something that's happened, I would say, very much in the last 2 years. We're seeing a lot of enterprises actually going to the cloud for it and moving applications to the cloud and utilizing those applications as well as the storage. Again, it's alleviating a lot of management costs associated with that given application or set of applications and moving to the cloud and essentially paying for it on a utility basis. Again, unstructured data is key, a key contributor to why the enterprise wants to move it to the cloud. Again, it simplifies a lot of the backups. Disaster recovery is a key use case along with archives. And overall, what it does provide better application performance because it alleviates maybe a lot of the content that is on an application that no longer needs to be on the specific application, move to the cloud. And in that practice, many times they gain better performance of the application overall. So those are the key use cases we have seen to date when it comes to the use of gateways with object storage in the cloud.
Okay, before we do a summary, we've got a couple of questions. I suppose, actually a really good one. Define NAS. I think it's a term we may have thrown in there without explaining fully what we mean.
Network addressable storage has been around for decades. It's
okay.
It's essentially a file, using file system versus block. It's a format for storage.
So it's primarily NFS and SMB to give them the official markers. Okay.
Exactly. Those are protocols used.
And the other question is quite a good one. I'm going to summarize this one actually because I think there's a more general conversation to be had around it. In particular to do with performance, and I suspect performance falls into two categories here. One will be obviously bandwidth, and the other is latency. How do we address these in these hybrid environments?
So it depends on the capabilities. Let's say in respect of gateways, there are some gateways that can actually provide cache. So what it does, essentially, it provides a ways and means to cache content that's intended for the cloud. It still kind of keeps it on-prem or within that appliance, but from an application standpoint, the job, workload and the job is complete when it sends it off, even though it's still stored in the cache. And then many times it could be like on a policy of a first in, first out or something like that. I see that many times. The other way is through optimization, right? The raw content itself, through a global file system, sets up a situation where you can actually do global data deduplication, which obviously shrinks the amount of content that goes in the cloud. Therefore, it optimizes what's going through from a bandwidth standpoint and provides, a better performance as far as storing that content into the cloud. As far as latency, is kind of tricky. Certainly, it depends on the content itself, and quite frankly, from a cloud storage plan that's out there. I mean, there's some out there that actually use tape, for example, in the cloud. And now, tape's a great resource for very deep storage where you have essentially no real access or want to have access. You just want to make sure that storage is safe and stored securely to some degree. But when it comes to accessing it when you need it, it may not actually perform as well as something that's sitting on rotating disk or even flash. So when it comes to selecting cloud as relates to latency and your accessibility, there are several different plans out there, and you got to make sure you choose the right one. And if you suspect that you're going to need access to content going to the cloud, it's probably better to go for one that has an SLA associated with it that meets your needs. And then some of them do provide SLAs, and others don't when it comes to availability and accessibility.
Okay, I've often heard it said that tape is the best bandwidth of all. There's nothing quite to beat a truckload of the things. The latency might be not that great, but you can shift a huge amount of data very quickly. Anyway.
Right. And quite frankly, if you look at cloud providers, a number of them now offer what I call a mass storage offering, where they can actually you can actually create a replica or whatever, or maybe it's the full copy, depending on what your needs are, and actually bring in equipment and bring in storage and nodes and compute in order to move that content, and then they physically move those nodes and storage to the cloud site in order to allow a en masse, we're talking petabytes of content being moved in a relatively short period of time, measured in days, where if you were trying to move all that content over to bandwidth direct to the cloud, it might take weeks and months. So those services are out there today, for sure.
Okay, thank you. So in summary,
key takeaways is one, new, and it's mostly unstructured data that emerge, and it's continuing to grow at an incredible CAGR. And what that does, it creates an expanding data ecosystem opportunity for every organization, but that demands a change where the content is stored and where it's managed. And that's where the hybrid cloud comes into play. It allows organizations to balance between on-prem and public, as well as dedicated cloud, based on what their needs are when it comes to data access and availability. Enterprises are also considering and implemented this multi-cloud strategy. Not one cloud offers everything for a given organization, and therefore, to bring on board multiple cloud providers as part of your hybrid cloud strategy is very smart. And that way you can get the best of the best, so to speak, and still gain a huge savings when utilizing the cloud and the economies that it brought on with it. And then finally, the use of gateways with cloud is a great way to kick off your hybrid cloud strategy. It provides a more cost-effective means and a more scalable solution for the enterprise, and therefore modernizing their business applications and storage processes across the board. So that concludes what I have for today, Alex.
Thank you very much indeed, Dan. So I'm just about to pop up a link. There we go. A copy of these slides can be found at, and I've given you the link there so you can pick up a copy of the slides. Any questions we didn't answer today, and there are a couple, we will answer in our blog, and I'll just move to the next slide because it actually contains all the details. And that will be available very shortly after this webcast, probably within the next 2 or 3 days or so. We'll get the answers to the questions up there, and people will be able to get everything answered that they asked during this session in an online format. So I'd like to thank you very much, Dan, for coming along and talking to us today about cloud gateways. And I'd like to thank our audience for being with us as well. If you could rate the webcast on the way out, we really do value your feedback, and it forms a large part of influencing what we do. People's interests in technology. Remember, SNEAR's goal is to educate and inform about the networking industry as a whole, that's what storage industry as a whole. And I would really encourage you to take the opportunity to comment on these presentations as you view them and rate us on the way out. As I say, a copy of the the presentation will be available on our cloud storage website, and the Q&A will be up on snearcloud.com. You can also follow us. We've got a Twitter handle at snearcloud. So without further ado, thank you very much indeed, Dan, for your time today. Thank you to the audience, and wherever you are, have a very good day. Thank you.